It is the year 2004. In a quiet, sun-baked residential courtyard in the small, unassuming Iranian town of Nushabad, a local man is undertaking a mundane household chore. He is digging a simple sewage shaft in his backyard. The desert heat is oppressive. The ground is baked hard like ceramic, and every strike of the iron pickaxe sends a jolt up his arms. But then, something impossible happens. At a depth of a few meters, his pickaxe does not strike clay. It breaks through the earth, and the ground beneath his boots simply gives way. The man stumbles back as a gaping, pitch-black void opens up in the very center of his property. When the blinding desert sunlight finally penetrates the dust of the collapsed sinkhole, it does not reveal an empty cave or a natural fissure. It reveals a perfectly carved, geometrically precise stone corridor, plunging straight down into the abyssal darkness of the earth. He had not just found a cave, he had accidentally breached the ceiling of a massive, fully engineered, multi-level subterranean metropolis. A ghost city hidden directly beneath the feet of an unsuspecting modern population. But what happened next is where the true mystery begins. Almost as quickly as the astonishing photographs of this underground labyrinth began to circulate among rogue archaeologists and historical researchers, a heavy, suffocating blanket of silence descended upon the site. The narrative was strictly controlled. Access was heavily restricted. The underground city, which holds the power to completely rewrite our understanding of ancient human engineering, was effectively sealed off from the broader international scientific community. Why? What is hiding in the claustrophobic depths of Nushabad? And what does it tell us about the true, suppressed timeline of human civilization on the Iranian plateau? Welcome to a history that you were never meant to know. Today, we are going to explore the buried truth of the sealed cities of Iran. We will journey beneath the earth to examine ancient fluid dynamics that defy logic, and we will cross the forbidden deserts to uncover evidence of high technology that predates the Egyptian pyramids by thousands of years. To understand the magnitude of the discovery at Nushabad, you must first understand the terrifying scale of the architecture. When local authorities and a select few Iranian archaeologists eventually secured the courtyard and descended into the void, they were not prepared for what they found. This was not a primitive basement or a collection of crude hiding holes. It was a sprawling, three-dimensional, three-tiered labyrinth spanning an incredible 1.5 hectares. It plunged 18 meters, nearly 60 feet, solidly into the unforgiving bedrock of the earth. Imagine making that descent. You step off the wooden ladder into the first level. The temperature instantly drops. The blinding glare of the Middle Eastern sun vanishes, replaced by a suffocating, absolute darkness. The air smells of ancient dust and damp, cold stone. The corridors here are deliberately, agonizingly narrow. The ceilings hover at roughly 170 centimeters. An average-sized man must walk hunched over, his shoulders constantly brushing against the rough-hewn stone walls. This claustrophobic design was not a mistake, nor was it a result of primitive tools. It was a calculated, psychological masterpiece of defensive architecture. The tunnels were engineered to force any invading soldier to break a single-file line, bow their heads, and restrict the swinging arc of their weapons. As you move deeper from the first tier to the second, the architecture becomes aggressively hostile. The pathways do not follow a logical grid. They twist violently. They curve back on themselves. They split into identical, mirroring bifurcations that lead absolutely nowhere. Entire passageways terminate in solid rock dead ends, designed specifically to trap heavily armored squads in the pitch black. And then there are the traps. The archaeologists mapping the site discovered deep, hidden pitfalls camouflaged into the floor pan. They found massive stone doors that functioned on a pivoting axis, requiring a specific, hidden counterweight to open. If you did not know the exact mechanical secret of the door, it was an impenetrable wall of solid rock. But a labyrinth is only a tomb if you cannot breathe. At 18 meters deep, surrounded by hundreds, potentially thousands of terrified citizens huddled together in tight stone corridors, the buildup of carbon dioxide would have been catastrophic. A modern engineer will tell you that a subterranean complex of this density, lacking an active electrical HVAC system, should be a mass grave of suffocation within a matter of days. Yet, the builders of Nushabad had solved this problem with a level of engineering genius that borders on the impossible for their supposed era. Carved vertically through the bedrock, connecting the 3 tiers to the surface, were sophisticated, U-shaped ventilation shafts. These shafts were not just holes poked in the ceiling. They were precisely calculated aerodynamic conduits. By varying the diameter of the shafts at specific depths, the ancient architects utilized the principles of fluid dynamics. They created a natural pressure differential, a vacuum effect, that continuously sucked stagnant, toxic air out of the lower levels, while pulling fresh, cool oxygen down from the surface. They achieved perfect, continuous air circulation without a single moving part. No electric fans, no mechanical pumps, not even primitive leather bellows. It was an autonomous, passive life support system running silently in the dark for thousands of years. Furthermore, the city was entirely self-sufficient regarding its water supply. Deep within the lowest 3rd tier, the architects had intentionally intercepted a natural subterranean aquifer. They carved massive waterproofed cisterns to hold the freezing crystal-clear water, ensuring that the population could survive indefinitely without ever needing to breach the surface to visit a well. Orthodox history, the history written in approved textbooks, provides a very neat, sanitized explanation for all of this. Academic institutions classify Nushabad as a massive bunker. They state that construction likely began under the Sassanid Empire, somewhere around the 3rd century AD, and continued into the medieval Islamic period. The rationale provided is that Nushabad is situated in a highly volatile geographical corridor. For centuries, this region was a violent thoroughfare for conquering armies. Arab invaders, the devastating hordes of Genghis Khan, and passing warlords routinely swept through the desert, burning everything in their path. Therefore, the narrative dictates, the local population simply grabbed pickaxes and spent generations carving out millions of tons of solid rock to hide from the swordsmen above. It makes sense on a superficial level. We know for a documented fact that these tunnels were utilized during the horrific Mongol invasions of the 13th century. But when you step back and look at the site through the lens of modern civil engineering, the orthodox narrative begins to fracture. If your town is constantly being burned to the ground by invading armies, and your environment is an agonizing desert, the logical human response is migration. You pack up your families and you leave for a safer province. You do not stay and commit to an astronomical, multi-generational public works project that requires the excavation of thousands of tons of bedrock using hand chisels. The sheer logistical nightmare of building Nushabad is staggering. Where did they put the excavated rock? To remove that volume of stone without leaving massive, obvious spoil heaps on the surface, which would instantly give away the secret location of the city to any passing army, requires a level of clandestine logistics that baffles modern project managers. Furthermore, the execution of the U-shaped ventilation system requires advanced mathematical calculation and an intimate, empirical understanding of atmospheric pressure. This is not trial and error engineering. If you make a mistake in calculating a passive ventilation shaft at 60 feet deep, your entire family suffocates. It has to be perfect the very first time. Does this sound like the desperate work of panicked medieval farmers trying to hide from men on horseback? Or does it look like the remnants of a highly advanced, mathematically proficient society preparing for a cataclysm that orthodox history refuses to acknowledge. This profound disconnect between what we are told and what actually exists in the ground is exactly why Nushabad was quietly sidelined. After the initial flurry of excitement in 2004, the site was heavily compartmentalized. Today, a very small, highly sanitized portion of the upper levels is occasionally shown to select tour groups. But the deepest, most complex tiers, the areas that hold the true engineering secrets, and potentially the artifacts that could accurately date the origins of the excavation, are strictly off-limits, sealed behind locked iron gates, protected by government mandate. But Nushabad is not an isolated incident. It is merely one piece of a much larger, continent-wide puzzle. To truly understand why the archive of ancient Iran is being kept sealed, we must travel 800 kilometers southeast, plunging into the unforgiving Halil River basin in the Kerman province. Welcome to Jiroft, and welcome to the discovery that almost broke the science of archaeology. In the year 2001, a massive, unseasonal weather event battered the southeastern deserts of Iran. Torrential rains flooded the Halil River, causing it to violently burst its banks. The raging waters scoured the desert floor, tearing away thousands of tons of topsoil that had lain undisturbed for millennia. When the floodwaters finally receded, the local villagers walked out into the mud and made a discovery that would spark an international crisis. Protruding from the eroded riverbanks were thousands upon thousands of exquisite, intricately carved artifacts. There were massive vessels carved from dark chlorite stone, inlaid with precious lapis lazuli and turquoise. There were statues of humanoid figures wrestling massive serpents, intricate depictions of step pyramids, and complex mythological beasts that looked distinctly alien. The locals, realizing the immense financial value of these strange objects, began a massive, chaotic looting operation. By the time the Iranian government realized what was happening and sent armed military units to lock down the entire valley, the black market was already flooded with over 100,000 artifacts. When international scholars finally got their hands on confiscated pieces from the Jiroft site, the resulting data caused an absolute uproar. For the last century, the bedrock of human history has rested on a single, unshakable pillar. Mesopotamia is the cradle of civilization. We are taught that the Sumerians, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in modern-day Iraq, were the absolute first. The first to build cities, the first to invent the wheel, the first to develop written language. But the artifacts pulled from the mud of Jiroft completely obliterated that timeline. Radiocarbon dating of the organic material found alongside the artifacts placed the Jiroft civilization at roughly 3000 to 4000 BC. That makes them contemporaries and, in some aspects, significantly older and vastly more advanced than the earliest known periods of Sumerian culture. The chlorite vessels from Jiroft displayed a level of artistic and structural sophistication that made the early Mesopotamian artifacts look like the work of children. Even more shockingly, archaeologists discovered a massive stepped ziggurat structure buried beneath a nearby mound known as Konar Sandal. This ziggurat is estimated to be one of the oldest, if not the oldest, monumental temple structures on the face of the earth. And then they found the tablets, baked clay fragments bearing an entirely unknown, undecipherable geometric script. It was a fully functional, complex writing system that predates the earliest known forms of Sumerian cuneiform. Let that sink in. The invention of writing, the very dividing line between prehistory and history, did not happen in Mesopotamia. It happened in the remote, scorching deserts of southeastern Iran. The Jiroft discovery meant that every single history textbook on the planet was wrong. It meant that a massive, highly advanced, technologically proficient civilization had thrived on the Iranian plateau, engaging in transcontinental trade, building massive architecture, and writing down their history long before the supposed first humans figured out how to stack mud bricks. So, what happened to this monumental, paradigm-shifting discovery? Why isn't Jiroft taught in every school across the world? It was sealed off. Following the initial excavations, geopolitical tensions between Iran and the West skyrocketed. Economic sanctions were enforced. Visas for foreign archaeological teams were aggressively denied or indefinitely delayed. The Iranian government, highly suspicious of foreign intervention and fiercely protective of its heritage, especially after the massive looting crisis, drew a hard line in the sand. The major excavations at Konar Sandal ground to a painful halt. The trenches were filled back in to protect them from the elements and further looting. The hundreds of thousands of recovered artifacts were locked away in the heavily guarded vaults of the National Museum in Tehran, far from the prying eyes of independent Western researchers. The story of Jiroft was quietly suffocated. Orthodox archaeologists, unable to access the site and verify the findings firsthand, simply chose to ignore it. They published papers minimizing the importance of the chlorite vessels, writing them off as mere trade goods from a secondary culture, stubbornly protecting the established Mesopotamian narrative. It is a profound academic tragedy. A lost empire, rising from the floodwaters to reclaim its rightful place as the true cradle of mankind, only to be shoved back into the dark by modern politics and academic arrogance. But the Iranian plateau refuses to stay quiet. If Jiroft challenges our timeline of architecture and writing, our final destination challenges our fundamental understanding of human biological science. We travel east, near the volatile border of Afghanistan, to one of the most desolate, hostile environments on the planet. Here lies a massive, sprawling ruin stretching across 300,000 hectares of scorched earth. Its original name is lost to time. Today, it is simply known as Shahr-e Sukhteh, the burnt city. It is called the burnt city because the archaeological record shows that this massive metropolis inexplicably burned to the ground 3 separate times before being permanently abandoned in 2100 BC. When a joint team of Iranian and Italian archaeologists began meticulously excavating the sprawling graveyards of Shahr-e Sukhteh in the late 1990s and early 2000s, they found a society that was operating at a level of technological sophistication that defies rational explanation. This was a massive, bustling industrial hub. They found evidence of advanced metallurgy, intricate textile weaving, and sophisticated jewelry manufacturing. But the true shockwaves came from the medical discoveries. In one of the graves, archaeologists uncovered the skeletal remains of a 13-year-old girl. When they examined her skull, they found a perfectly cut surgical incision. The bone had been carefully, deliberately excised to treat hydrocephalus, a dangerous buildup of fluid on the brain. But the most terrifying detail was the bone growth around the edges of the cut. It indicated that the girl had survived the incredibly invasive, complex neurosurgery. She lived for several months after her skull was opened. We are talking about successful, calculated brain surgery performed 4,800 years ago, in the middle of an absolute desert, by a society that orthodox history claims had barely mastered bronze tools. How did they manage the catastrophic risk of infection? What did they use for anesthesia? How did they possess the anatomical knowledge to avoid severing the delicate neural pathways? But the medical anomalies of the burnt city do not stop at neurosurgery. In December 2006, archaeologists excavating another tomb made a discovery that sounds like it was ripped from the pages of a science fiction novel. They found the remains of a tall woman, standing over 6 feet, an absolute giant for the era. But it was not her height that captivated the researchers. Resting in the left socket of her skull was a perfect, golden, artificial eye. It was not merely a decorative burial trinket placed after death. Microscopic analysis of the eye socket revealed severe abrasion marks on the bone, proving that she wore this prosthetic device during her lifetime. The eye itself was an engineering marvel. It was crafted from a lightweight mixture of natural tar and animal fat. It was anatomically shaped to fit the orbital cavity perfectly. But the truly chilling detail was the surface of the eye. The ancient craftsman had used incredibly fine golden wires, measuring less than 0.5 millimeter thick, to meticulously recreate the delicate capillary veins of a real human eyeball. A custom-fitted, anatomically correct, golden prosthetic eye, complete with micro-engineered capillaries, created nearly 5 millennia ago. Let me ask you a question. When you look at the passive aerodynamic ventilation of the Nushabad underground city, the undeciphered script and monumental architecture of Jiroft, and the successful neurosurgery and microprosthetics of the burnt city, do you see the primitive, fumbling steps of early man? Or do you see the fading echoes of a highly advanced, pre-existing golden age? This brings us to the ultimate, chilling conclusion. The sealing off of these sites is not merely a matter of modern bureaucratic red tape or geopolitical sanctions. It represents a massive systemic failure of the orthodox scientific establishment. We have built our entire understanding of human history on a linear timeline. A slow, steady, agonizing climb from cave-dwelling hunter-gatherers to the mud-brick huts of Mesopotamia, to the eventual brilliance of Greece and Rome, leading directly to us. This timeline is comfortable. It flatters our modern egos, telling us that we are the absolute apex of human achievement. But the sands of Iran completely shatter that comfortable illusion. They present a cyclical view of history, a terrifying reality where high civilization can rise, achieve miraculous feats of engineering and medicine, and then be violently wiped out by cataclysm, war, or nature, forcing humanity to start over in the ashes. The orthodox academic establishment is terrified of this concept. It requires tearing up a century of established PhDs, textbooks, and museum plaques. It requires admitting that they do not possess the complete picture. And so, when an underground city like Nushabad is found, or an impossibly old civilization like Jiroft washes out of the mud, the easiest solution is to classify it as an anomaly, to lock the gates, to deny the visas, to seal the archive. But the earth cannot be silenced forever. The tectonic plates shift, the rivers flood, and the truth inevitably breaches the surface. Iran is not just a country on a map. It is the forbidden hard drive of the human race. It holds the suppressed data of our true origins, waiting patiently in the dark, beneath the scorching deserts and the jagged mountains. The cities have been sealed, the artifacts have been locked away, but the questions remain, echoing through the empty, U-shaped ventilation shafts of Nushabad. Who were they? Where did their knowledge come from? And what terrifying event forced a society of advanced engineers and brilliant surgeons to abandon the sun, dig 18 meters into solid rock, and hide in the dark? What do you think is truly hiding beneath the Iranian plateau? Do you believe the orthodox timeline? Or do you think we are a species with amnesia, living on the ruins of a forgotten golden age? Let me know your theories down in the comments below. If this deep dive into the suppressed history of humanity opened your eyes, hit that like button to help bypass the algorithm and share this forbidden history with the world. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because our journey into the unknown is just beginning. Next time, we are leaving the deserts of the Middle East and heading deep into the heart of the Amazon jungle, where LiDAR technology has just penetrated the canopy to reveal something that experts swore could not possibly exist. Until then, keep digging, keep questioning, and never accept the official narrative.